We are in a hippodrome. You just can't see it. It's all gone now, except for this end behind that building there. It's actually built on top of the back end of the hippodrome where the ground slopes away. And you have this huge curved structure holding up the whole back end of this thing. This hippodrome rivaled the Circus Maximus in Rome. It was huge. And in order to, of course, have the proper setting, you have stands going all the way around this thing, which are gone now. Over here, which would have been the royal box where the emperor or a magistrate or somebody would have sat up in the box up there, and this thing would have held 180,000 people. It was huge. There were riots here that maybe DeLake can tell us about at some point, called the Nika riots, which are something that is not part of biblical history at all. But when they were done with the riots that happened in here, because some wore blue and some wore green, depending on who their favorite chariot racing team was, they'd ended up with 35,000 people dead right where you're standing right now just because of these riots. It's quite amazing. But down the center of any one of these hippodromes, wherever you found them, you had a spine, or they call it the spina, and it was the place. If you saw the movie Ben-Hur, the only person I know that's never seen it is Jeremy. So you've seen it, okay? But it's you see them going around this thing in the middle where it's got the big statues and obelisks like that. Obelisks are really fashionable to have on the spine of the hippodrome. And so any hippodrome, this one had them too. This obelisk used to be 109 feet tall, but when they were shipping it in, because they're really hard to move and they're even harder to stand up on end, it was fashionable to bring them from Egypt. This thing sat on the beach for about 50 years or so, and until somebody finally brought it over here and hacked 30 feet off of it and then set it up. But they set it up on this. This is what's called a relief. It's like a sculpture, but it's carved so that it's a relief out of the stone, and it just indicates people in the stands and watching what's going on, watching a chariot race or what have you, as they would go around this huge track. But this particular thing here, you've got people who are down here who are watching the race. You have the king or the emperor up here. You have all the dignitaries up here, and this would be that box, which would be up over here. The reason it was on this side is the palace is back there, so he could just come straight from the palace to his royal box, stand there, sit there, watch the race happen, and then the winner, when he won, would be presented with a laurel wreath crown. Now, some of you know this. You have the crowns that are the crowns of the king, the diadems, and then you had the crowns of victory. And those are the ones, like, once again, the movie Ben-Hur. If you saw it, he's given a crown of leaves, and Pontius Pilate in the movie puts it on his head and said, "I crowned their God. You're their God for a day." And of course, a very pagan thing for a pagan man to say, but it probably would have happened like that. What you're seeing is the same thing. Here's the emperor, and he's got the victor's crown. And what would happen, just like in the movie Ben-Hur, Charlton Heston, Ben-Hur, he wins the race. Masala is vanquished. And he now walks up a long flight of stairs, it would have been over there, and would have come up to the king, like here, and eventually walked right up in front of the king, like what you saw in the movie, and he would have put this laurel wreath crown on his head. But he had to ascend the stairs to do it. Now, one of the things that I'm going to talk about, not today, but coming up in coming days, is that the Bible is full of idioms. Things like phrases that only meant something to the people back then. We can break it down into the Greek. The Greek definition is this, but it's not going to tell you what they thought necessarily of what was really going on. And I used the example, just across the Black Sea here, I was over in Moldova a year ago, and I was trying to explain this to a guy. And he said, "What do you mean by that?" He says, "What do you mean the Bible's full of idioms?" And I said, "What do you think if I use the term far out?" I'm from the 70s, right? Far out. And he goes, "Oh, something very far away." And I said, "Nope, it means excellent." He's, "What?" I said, "Yes, to an American, especially from my era, far out means excellent. If something was great, you go, far out, man." And he didn't understand. The Bible has these things on every page, sometimes in every sentence, because it's written in the vernacular of the day, not just in the language that was preferred. So when it talks about this, when you see this sort of thing happening in Ben-Hur, you say, well, so what? It's in the Bible, and it's in a very, very popular verse. Let me read it to you. Philippians, written from Rome to Philippians, just across the way here. Paul said, not that I have already obtained all of this, or have been made perfect, but I press on to take hold for that with which Christ Jesus took hold of me. It sounds like he's running a race. You have to ask the question, what kind of race? Foot race? I don't think so, and here's why. Brothers, I do not consider myself yet to have taken hold of it, but one thing I do, forgetting what is behind and straining toward what is ahead, I press on toward the goal to win the prize for which God has called me heavenward in Christ Jesus. Those are all idioms. Idioms for a race, idioms for winning a race, and when you've run the race, you walk up the stairs heavenward and he crowns you. Just like that. That's a picture of it, and you're standing in a place where that idiom just comes home to everyone who just read this because they understand what Paul was talking about, how he was referring to it. Do you see it? Do you understand it? Philippians chapter 3 right there. You just saw it. Okay, let's move on to something else. We're going to go right over. This object here is related to some biblical characters. Again, nothing in the Bible takes place right here, but so many things that happen in the Bible are somehow represented here. This is a bronze column. It's been standing here since it was put here, so it hasn't been moved. It didn't look like that. It looked like this at the top. It's called the serpent column. So it had snakes' heads, but it's like three snakes that are intertwined with each other, and the snakes' heads went out, and they're big. Part of one is in a museum somewhere. I maybe here, but just the top part of it, that part, is all that exists. They smashed it. But it used to have, from the top of the snakes' heads, apparently these rods that went up, and it held some sort of, maybe a flaming bowl of some sort. And it originally started in Delphi. Constantine had it moved here and put right in the center of the spina between the two obelisks because it was so important. But this was cast out of one single piece. It wasn't hammered together or welded together. And it sat there for, again, it's been there ever since it was put up. It's a permanent artifact. But here's what's significant about it. In the 3rd century BC, there was a fellow whose name was Xerxes. Remember him? Who's one of his wives? Esther. Xerxes had a harem, but one of his main and most beloved wife was Esther. Xerxes, however, was not really a very nice guy and really liked to conquer, and well, he decided to move into Greece, conquer Greece. And when he was moving in, the Spartans, along with the Thespians, which amounted to about 6,000 soldiers led by the 300 Spartans of the, not myth, but definitely history, defended the pass at Thermopylae down there in Greece. And as you know the story, that Xerxes sent wave after wave against soldiers against this 6,000 man contingent blocking the pass so that they couldn't get through and go down towards Athens. And as they were protecting it, of course, the shepherd sold the pass to Xerxes, and of course the Spartans were wiped out. They sent the Thespians back. The 300 held their ground on a mound where today the archaeologists who have been digging around and haven't found much, but they did find 8,000 arrowheads embedded in the mound. So they know they found the right place, and it wasn't something of legend, it was something definitely of history. Well, after that, Xerxes was rather taken back by this whole thing and horribly defeated. Even though he had won the day, he had lost these battles because he had lost thousands of men against just a handful of these very tough men, led by 300 very, very strong Spartans. Well, as his campaign continued, and there's a lot that could be said about it. In fact, one of our great experts that are here on this subject, it would be Dan. He can give you all kinds of details on it. Right, Dan? He's over there. And he can give you dates and everything. That the next year, as Xerxes continued his campaign and he got closer to Athens, he engaged the same Greeks in a place called Plataea, which is north of Athens. And it became known as the Battle of Plataea 1 year later. Except this time he didn't have 300 Spartans. This time he had 35,000 Spartans against him, along with all the support and the Thespians and the Greeks. And when they went to battle, they were soundly defeated. One of the biggest armies ever to march was Xerxes' army. It was enormous, and they were utterly defeated. So what happened after that is all of their armor, all of their weapons were gathered together, the bronze, and they were melted down. And they were made into a monument to set up at Delphi. This is made out of the bits and pieces that were left of Xerxes' army being defeated. This is from Xerxes' soldiers that were defeated there at Plataea. And the states, the Greek states, and there were lots of them, that actually gathered together with the Spartans and defeated them, are etched down on the bottom of the column. All their names are still there. And there's somewhere on a placard here, it will actually tell you the names of those, and you can look it up also on the internet if you like, but it's at the bottom. Again, the thing's been damaged, the top's been broken off, but it's still there. But you're looking at something that's related directly to King Xerxes, who was Esther's husband, who tried to conquer the entire world. And that's where he got stopped. And this is the monument to it. So there you go.